Are you here? Because if you're not here, we can't start the Paul Leslie Hour. Dave's here too. Now, let me explain. We've got an interview from our radio archives with Dave Brogan. Now, many of you know Dave Brogan as the drummer, vocalist, and songwriter with the band ALO. Now, back in 2008, Dave released his solo debut, Thunderbird Sun Transformation. It is a coveted album. And if you have it, you hang on to it. If you want it, gotta get it. Your host, Paul Edward Leslie, met Dave through his backstage interview with ALO. And by the way, Dave's here. So anyone who says Dave's not here doesn't know what they're talking about. Dave Brogan is an interesting, intelligent, and very cool, chilled, laid-back dude. We like him. And by the way, we like supporters and helpers, too. You can be a patron of the spoken word and independent media. Simply go to www.thepaulleslie.com/support. Even if you just want to buy Paulie a cold beverage or a hot beverage, it's greatly appreciated. Hey, let's hear the time when Dave Brogan and Paul Leslie had a creative talk, an interview. In fact, hey, he's here. Let's listen to Dave together.
Hello?
Hey, Dave, this is Paul.
Hey, Paul, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
All right. Our special guest on this episode is Mr. Dave Brogan. David Brogan is a member of the Animal Liberation Orchestra, or ALO, and he is also a solo artist. He's joining us to talk about his album, Thunderbird Sun Transformation. So first of all, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
I don't know if you remember, but I actually interviewed you with the ALO guys a few years back. You guys, you guys were with opening for Jack Johnson in Atlanta.
Yeah, I remember that.
All right. Well, I wanted to just kind of get a little background. We didn't get to go into detail on each member too much, but tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born and what was life like for you when you were growing up?
I was born in Fresno, California. That's a town in central California, probably about 3-4 hours away from San Francisco. And that whole area of central California is very rural. Well, Fresno is not rural anymore because it's really grown, but I grew up in a little town called Tulare, California. It's about 25,000 people, and it's just kind of it's all just farmland out there. A lot of times people don't associate California with farming and dairies and stuff like that, but that's sort of where I grew up. Not far from Bakersfield, where a lot of country western guys came from, like Merle Haggard and Buck Owens. And growing up, there wasn't much to do out there, so high school music programs were usually pretty popular. It's like marching band was really actually a kind of a exciting thing to do in that area because there wasn't a whole lot of other things going on, and jazz band. I just always did a lot of music in school and stuff. That was my main exposure to music before I went to college.
And what kind of music was playing around the house?
Around the house, growing up, it was very much like just FM radio. So, a lot of Fleetwood Mac and, Dr. Hook and Bread and, all the Eagles, a lot of just like what the stuff they played on. A lot of like hard rock, like Van Halen and Journey, and grew up with that. Where I grew up was almost kind of like hard kind of area. I call it like Calabrasca a lot of times because it's like in California, but you might as well be in Nebraska or something. It's real heartland. So, we listened to a lot of that type of music, Bob Seger and that type of stuff for real. But, and then, my mom, we grew up I grew up going to church too, so there's a lot of church music that I listened to and was exposed to like every week. And, you know, a little bit of country western. And then when the 80s kind of hit, then hip hop became really like a big part of the musical landscape for us, you know. We got really into hip hop very early on, 80, 84, 85. That was a big deal.
Tell us about the Okie folk songs.
Oh yeah, the Okie folk songs. Well, my mom's, you know, like on my dad's side, it's like the way I always say it is like my dad's side is Irish and my mom's side is Okie. You know, it's like Oklahoma is kind of like our country of origin in a way. It's my mom's side was just part of that migration, you know, and around World War II that came out from Oklahoma to California. All our relatives, most of our relatives, all came out at some point in the 40s. So my grandpa we'd sit around. He was a musician and he played like fiddle and guitar. And when I was really young, he would like he'd kind of like teach me a couple things on guitar, and like he'd sing some old, you know, kind of just like songs, like I can't even remember some of them, you know, like Red Rooster, and he'd sing like, you know, Merle Haggard songs or Hank Williams songs, which almost to me seemed like folk songs in a way, you know, even that's like just like country western. Like the thing that was folky about it was just kind of the way that we would sit around and sing them, you know, and play them like in the living room, you know. That was like it was just like people's music, you know. And so yeah, that's the Okie folk song. That's my Okie musical heritage, basically.
So what was it, if you could point to one or two things that made you want to be a musician?
Yeah. I think definitely one of the things was just marching drumline. Like the drums in the marching band, like the first time I heard that, you know, I was like really young. I was probably like 6 or 7, and those drums would go by, and I just remember it just like rattling my chest, you know, like my whole body would just vibrate when those drums went by. And I knew that like I had to do that. You know, I knew that that was just going to be something I was going to do. And I was always just like kind of a natural, or pretty good at it, you know, so that's always feels good to be good at something, and that's encouraging, you know, to keep doing it. And I don't know, you know, it's just like there weren't like a lot of really like seminal experiences. It was just something I always did and just kept doing. And I just kept doing it. There was never even any reason to stop. You know, so I just kept playing music and kept taking it to the next level.
So how did you meet? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Man, that's just that. And now that has led up to today. Still trying to do that, you know.
So how did you meet the other musicians in the Animal Liberation Orchestra, or ALO?
I met them in college. We all went to the University of California in Santa Barbara, and it had a really cool, interesting music scene there at the time when we got there, because it's like a really, the college town there is just all college students. It's not like a lot of colleges where you got one section of town that's like, oh, there's a lot of college students in that section of town near the university. The whole town pretty much is college students. So it's like this really interesting kind of situation. There's a lot of parties, and when we were going to school there were a lot of bands that would just set up at parties and play. So you had a lot of musicians, you had a lot of bands. You could always find a place to play every weekend, and it was just a real vibrant kind of scene. And then that was going on in the college town. And Santa Barbara, the town itself, had a really good music scene going on at the same time. There were tons of places to play, and it was just a great live music situation. And so my band, I was in a different band that had been going a little bit earlier, and then those guys got there, and they had their band that they brought down from Saratoga, and we just started playing together just by the fact that we're, you know, always just seeing each other play music. I think at one point, like I just moved my drums into their garage. So I just needed a place to practice drums. And of course, from there, it just sort of took off.
The drums stayed.
What's that? The drums just stayed, yeah.
All the listeners out there can take a look at your MySpace page, and there's some interesting pictures on there. And I think there's one that shows you in, is it Austria?
Oh, yeah, with the hat.
Yeah. You've gotten to play a lot of interesting places. What's been the one that's stuck out in your mind the most? Or a couple?
Well, I mean, well, we've definitely played some interesting places on that tour in Europe. The old, I don't know what they were, that's like indoor sports stadiums. Something pretty crazy. I think one, playing in they have these, in Brazil, they have these samba stadiums where like the samba parades go through, and like there's just like big bleachers on each side. And we played a couple of those in Brazil with Jack, and those are pretty unusual. That was kind of a cool scene. Red Rocks in Colorado, I think, is just one of the most amazing venues ever built, and that was a cool place. I mean, out in Georgia, I was just talking with my girlfriend last night about how ALO used to play this little bar out in North Augusta, right over the Savannah River from Augusta in South Carolina. We'd play there like every Friday and Saturday night, and it was just like probably like the closest to a roadhouse, that ALO's ever come to playing. It was just a crazy late night southern scene, because everyone in Augusta would. I think in Georgia, they serve alcohol till like 2 or 3 in the morning, and then when the bars there would close up, the cop on duty at the bar would give you a plastic cup that you could pour your beer into, take with you on the road, and then everyone like jump in their cars and drive over the river and go to South Carolina, and where they could just serve all night and just go until the sun came up. So we were that band. We'd set up at around 11 at night, but like no one would really get there till like 3 or 4 in the morning when the party would start. So that was an unusual place to play.
With ALO, you guys have gotten the chance to play some pretty big crowds, and I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through this experience. What is it like when you're playing someplace where there's just a huge crowd, just kind of through your eyes? What is that experience like?
I kind of think it's sort of surreal, but it's also kind of like after the first 1,000 people in the front, you kind of don't even, everything else just sort of becomes a blur of people, it's like a wash. And so it's not really like, you don't necessarily like feel like every 20,000 little sets of eyes like on you or whatever. But when it comes to when the crowd actually like applauds or whatever or cheers, like that's pretty intense. That's like some serious sound, coming at you. And there's been a few shows in particular where it's just like that kind of like just 20,000, 30,000 people just like screaming at you, and it's like an intense experience, That's what's really exciting about it, I think.
The energy.
Yeah.
You have a solo album, Thunderbird Sun Transformation. I was hoping you could tell us what made you want to decide to kind of branch away from ALO on this project and record a solo effort.
I think it's just a chance to do more of my material that wasn't necessarily right for ALO or wasn't the best fit for ALO. Being one of the songwriters, being one of like 4 songwriters in the band, you can't always get all the tunes in there, and some of the tunes just weren't right for ALO. And I think just having the experience of doing my own thing and steering my own ship was a good thing to do.
Tell us about the song "Easy."
Well, I wrote that I kind of that was kind of inspired by a friend of mine who was kind of like not taking it very easy at the time, being a little uptight. But I think that I saw like a little reflection of myself in that too, you know. So I think it's a song as much to myself as it is to this person, and you know, just like it's lyrically, I think it's just sort of an acknowledgement of like how easy it is not to take it easy, not to like let things go, because we live in a society that's pretty stressful and is like always putting a lot of demands on us. You know, a lot of us have all bought into a system that's not necessarily the most healthy thing for our psyches all the time. So I think it's sort of trying to be like a reminder of that. You know, like, you know, a lot of these pressures that we feel are not. We don't necessarily need to take them on just because someone's telling us we should. You know, we have a choice to kind of look at it from the other direction and of like, I'm going to choose. My main goal in life is to be, you know, peaceful and easy, and I'm going to look at all this other stuff from that direction and choose what I want to take on and what I don't want to take on.
This can be hard sometimes for a musician to put into words, but what is it that you like about music?
Well, you know, I think on a real basic level, like I like sound. You know, I've always been really just keyed into sound. So it's just an opportunity to play with sound and experiment with sound and share sounds with other people. And I also really love being creative. I don't know, when I'm in a creative state, that's sort of like bliss for me. It's a blissful state. So I think it's a combination of those two things where I can be creative with my love of sound and combine those two things in one activity. It's just sort of what does it for me.
There's another song on your album that I really like called The Infinite Eye.
Yeah.
Tell us about that one.
Oh, that was sort of lyrically sort of a similar thing, right? I think there's a small kind of sub-theme on the album of this idea of the values of the world not necessarily being always the values that are best for people. And I think kind of like, you know, The Infinite Eye has the same message of like changing the awareness, you know, or just having an awareness of that there's a lot of values that we're told that we're supposed to have. And a lot of people don't even take the time to make a conscious choice about that. They just take it on. And that's not always the best thing to do. It's not always the best thing for me. But I think I was just going through a period of that, of like trying to reevaluate what I wanted my values to be and kind of looking at where they came from, the values that I had, or the values that a lot of people had. And so that's sort of what was going on lyrically with that song. And musically, that song came together in a weird way too, because it started with a little sketch, like this guitar loop sketch that I put together with Pro Tools on my laptop, and it was really just done really quickly. I was just kind of fooling around, and then later I had this loop thing that was going, and later on I came up with the lyrics. But it's kind of neat because that original loop that I made just as a sketch is still the main loop in the song, so it carried over all the way from the very beginning of the idea all the way through to like the final version of the song. So I really like the way that the process that I used to come up with the music for that song was pretty cool. That's something that song in particular, I'd like to sort of explore that style more on the next album.
So when somebody listens to your album, Thunderbird Sun Transformation, or when they listen to something you do with ALO, or when they hear you in concert, what is it that you hope that the listener gets out of the experience?
No, I think different people get different things out of music, I think, you know. But I think that too fast?
Yeah.
Sorry, just had like a big piece of news happened now.
Pass the test?
Yeah, somebody passed the test.
All right.
Somebody passed a really important test.
Excellent.
Yeah. You know, that's kind of what I want people to get out of my music when they hear it. Kind of like the feeling of passing a really important test. And then the joy that can bring.
Very good.
Yeah. You know, it's just really about like alleviating stress and being able to plug into like a kind of a blissful art experience. You know, that's what I think listening to music is about.
Tell us about Stony Fields.
See, Stony Fields is about where I grew up in Tulare. I was driving through the valley one night in the evening, and the San Joaquin Valley it's very lush when it's planted, but there's also a lot of fields that don't have anything in them, and they're just sort of like rocky and barren, you know, and dusty. So I was driving through the valley, main highway 99, and there was all these like barren fields all around me. And the highway was lined with all these trees. And it was getting near sundown, and there were all these crows were coming into the trees to roost for the night. I mean, there are like thousands and thousands and thousands of crows coming into these trees. So I kind of got the idea of like these crows were like visions, you know, in the night, or watchers in the night. But the fields, you know, I was kind of like saying about get me out of the field. The field was about like having to leave my home, you know, to do music, because there's not a lot of opportunities for musicians in a rural area like that. So it's sort of just about like having the energy to leave home, you know, in search of what you want to accomplish in life. And somehow those crows sort of inspired me to think about that.
I have two final questions before we go.
Yeah.
What is your all-time favorite meal?
My all-time favorite meal?
Yes.
Food meal. You mean the one that I've had, or just like what my favorite dish, or like a meal that I had in the past that was like really great?
The one that...
What do you think?
It could be either one. It could be one that you would like to have, or one that you have had.
Well, this is like, I don't know, I had a meal in Florence once, in Italy, that was sort of like unforgettable. And it was just, the food was great. It was right in this little like restaurant right on the other side of the Ponte Vecchio, like on the, I don't know, starting on the, you know, if you start on the side of the city where all the sort of the old in the downtown area is, and you go across Ponte Vecchio, there's this little place around the other side. And we went in there to eat. It was like dinner time. It's got a little tiny restaurant, but they had like communal tables where we sat down with a bunch of other people. And we just started doing the meal thing like the real way, you know, where you get the antipasti, and you get the first dish, first course, second course, and everything that's coming. We had the wine. But the amazing thing about the meal was like the server, whatever, the waiter, whatever. The guy was just, I could see him. He would just stand back in the kitchen, and he would just watch us. He was just watching us eat. And as soon as we went, his timing was so perfect. You know, it'd be like he'd finish something, and then he'd get a little bit of time just to enjoy a little wine, but just the right amount of time, and then he'd bring in that dish, and everything was just perfectly timed, like to an extent, like I don't think I've experienced it in any restaurant in the United States, not even like the nicest restaurant I've ever been to in the U.S. has not done it like the way this guy did it. So that was probably my best meal ever. I mean, just because of the attention to the experience that the people who were making the meal had. But I also really like a good burrito.
A burrito?
Yeah. A good San Francisco mission-style burrito can just about do it for me anytime, too.
Very good. Well, yeah. I have one final question. This broadcast is going out all over the world. What would you like to say to all the people that are listening in?
Just thanks for listening. thanks for supporting ALO, and thanks for supporting my music. Check out Thunderbird Sun Transformation, my album. You can get it on iTunes. You can get it from CD Baby. And do you have a lot of Hawaiian listeners to your show? Or
We have some.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be in Kauai from the 14th to the 29th, playing around the island. Might do a Surfrider Foundation benefit with Donovan Frankenreiter and some guys. So if anyone's out on Kauai, keep an eye out. I'll be there.
All right. Well, Mr. Brogan, thank you very much for this interview.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
We thank you and appreciate you dropping in for the Paul Leslie Hour today. You know, you can help the Paul Leslie Hour in our mission to provide independent media content like this by visiting www.thepaulleslie.com/support. We truly thank you. This is your announcer speaking. Performance of The Entertainer intro song and Corina Corina outro song, courtesy of John Primorano. Well, that's it for today. So until next time, be safe and be good.